Good evening, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. I'm just going to raise this a little bit here. My name is Jasper Dent. I'm the event coordinator for McNally Robinson Booksellers here in Saskatoon. This event is being held on Treaty 6 territory. This is the land of the Cree, Dene, Saulteaux, Dakota, Nakota, and Lakota, and homeland of the Métis Nation. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the Saskatoon launch of Seventhblade by Tonia Laird, published by ECW Press. Joining us as returning guest host tonight is Cort Dogniez. Thank you to both Tonia and Cort for working with us to create this event, and thank you all for coming out here on this wonderfully warm Friday night and listening to a book launch. Just a note that this event is being live streamed, so there's a web camera up to your right here. It's just focused on the stage, not the audience. I would also like to take this moment to remind you all to please silence or turn off your cell phones. If you'd like to buy copies of Seventhblade, we have some up here on the signing table. There will be a signing after the event portion. We've also got some on the desk by where you first walked in. And if you do want to get your copy signed, you're welcome to do that before you purchase it. We just ask that you please remember to stop by the cash desk on your way out. Now I'd like to hand things over to our host for the evening. Cort Dogniez is a proud Métis author born and raised in Saskatoon. His first book, Road to La Prairie Ronde, was released in 2020 and received 2 nominations from the Saskatchewan Book Awards. His second book, Growing Up Métis, Stories of Resiliency, was released in May 2024 and also was shortlisted for 2 Sask Book Awards. Yeah, that one's going off memory. It wasn't in your bio there. So both are published by Gabriel Dumont Institute here in Saskatoon. Cort is an oral storyteller and is proud to share stories told to him by his Skookum, Clara Delorme, as well as other Indigenous elders and knowledge keepers. Everyone, please welcome the wonderful Cort Dogniez.
Thank you, Jasper. Well, good evening, everybody. I know how awesome it is to be able to look out on a crowd and see people that come to your book launch. It's kind of reassuring. So I thank you all for taking the time to come, particularly when I thought earlier today there was going to be thunder and lightning and hail and that sort of thing. And I wondered how we would do, but here you are. And so that is awesome. I welcome you here this evening, everybody. Mio Taksin Kakio. So welcome to everybody. So my name is Cort Dogniez, but we're here to celebrate Tonia Laird and her book, Seventhblade, which is just a phenomenal story. And I'm hoping that all of you will take the opportunity to buy one, get it signed, and take it home and read it because it's amazing. So let me just give you Tonia's biography. So Tonia Laird is a Métis writer from Treaty 6 territory and grew up on a farm just east of Davidson, about an hour south of Saskatoon. School and work took her to the west and east coasts, but the land and skies of Saskatchewan kept calling her home. So home is here, and she is married, and there's Elmer right here, and there's Ray right here as well as part of her family, and I know that there are lots of family and friends here as well. Her work is included in multiple publications, including literary magazines, fantasy and comic book anthologies, as well as AAA video games, Dragon Age 2 and Dragon Age Inquisition, mobile game Everlove, Rose, and the interactive novel Poster Girl. Her debut novel, Seventhblade, was released June 2025 by ECW Press, and Tonia's most recent stint in video games was as a lore keeper and world builder at Penny's Entertainment. So I'm going to turn it over to Tonia, and she's going to share some perspectives and do a little bit of reading of the stories. And then we have some questions, and then we're hoping that we can open it up to the audience and that you'll have some questions for her as well.
Make it a lot shorter. Yeah, that's pretty good, eh? Everyone here. Awesome. Okay. Bit nervous tonight just because this is such a big night, obviously. But yeah, I just wanted to share, why I started writing this book and what I got out of it, really. So I'll start with that. Yeah, I started actually writing this book back in 2022, or at least with the story back in 2022, 2023. So that was back when I was in animation school. So this actually started out kind of first as like an idea for an animation, then as a comic book, and then back to an animation, then maybe a comic book again, just kind of went back and forth a lot. And the reason why actually the story began in the first place was I lost a friend to terminal illness. There's a couple days actually after her 20th birthday. And I was 22, 23 at the time, so I didn't really know how to process the grief. So I basically personified it and got really mad because I was just really angry about losing a friend like that. And angry for not only for me, but for her family, for the loss and all the pain she had to go through while she was sick. So it turned into more of a revenge fantasy story for a while. And then I put it away, and then I would just keep on coming back to it. And I felt like this is a story that I actually needed to tell eventually. And I'm glad that it was 22 years or 23 years later that I actually finished it, because I've learned a lot more about how to process grief. And I've experienced different kinds of grief as well. But I also, it just took my experiences now allowed me to write it from a much better place, I think, not just anger. So, but other than that, it's not just a book about grief, it's a book about reconnecting as a Métis person. The main character, she is half human, half god, and her community, or her country is like maybe a century into colonization. So it's basically only on one part of the country right now, but it's slowly encroaching inwards. So I can just start reading, and then we'll do a lot more explanation during the Q&A. So. Okay. I'm just going to read part of chapter 1. So, she smells smoke. Moving swiftly in the dark, Terralise pushes through the dense forest as she makes her way back home. The smoke grows stronger with every scarred birch and solid spruce she passes. It's not the comforting scent of a home's hearth or the metallic tang of a blacksmith's forge. No. It smells of sage and hair and cedar and cloth and barley and flesh. This smoke, it's the twisting, rueful child of an Acrelian funeral pyre. Someone in the village has died. Someone important. Terralise thinks back. No one was sick when she left. No one was injured or pregnant. Whoever it was, the death must have been sudden. Terralise swallows the bile that rises in her throat. Dylan. No, he's too young yet, isn't he? Besides, if something had happened to him, June would have hunted her down already. Their son wouldn't let her find out about Dylan this way. She shakes her head to push thoughts away. Whoever it is, she should be there to support Dylan and June. The dead may be a friend from the village. She ignores the nocturnal creatures that skitter away from her as she pushes her way through the bare Misaskatominatic and Aoskanatic that separate the forest from the village surrounding her home. Her breath puffs out in white clouds as she takes a moment to calm her lungs. Along the freshly cut fields of foreign cereal grasses, a flickering glow lights the village square. She shouldn't have left. Terralise forces herself into a run, the remains of the harvested crops crunching and scratching against her boots. The packed earth feels so wrong, so dry and lifeless compared to the forest she's been hiding away in for the last 2 weeks. Pulling her hood up and tucking her hair back, she approaches the village square quietly, following the smoke and the fire's glow. The crowd is large. A cold shiver snakes down her sweat-soaked back. The Ibinnas, not just the Acrelian villagers, surround the pyre, separated by the roaring fire. If they are here, welcome and willing to attend an Acrelian ceremony, then whoever died was someone important to them, important to her. But the only Ukrainian worth anything to her is Dellen. Terribly searches the crowd, eyes never resting for long on the shadow-gone faces before her. When she notices Dellen isn't standing with the Ibinashe, her lungs stop working. Where is he? Her eyes catch on the unnaturally white robes of that ridiculous Ukrainian priest as he gestures to the sky as he gestures to the fire and to the sky, speaking in his people's old tongue. To his left, thank the creation and the destruction, is Dellen. Terelise's lungs stutter out a sigh of relief. He's alive. Leaning heavily against his side is Corleanne, a slight, golden-haired Ukrainian woman, and she weeps openly. Dellen's eyes aren't dry either. Terelise tilts her head. Something is still very wrong. Corleanne's son, Quinn, a dear friend of June's, should be at her other side, but he's not here. Neither is June. A prickle at the edge of her senses pulls her attention to her left. An older Ukrainian man, one who often frequents the Silverleaf, the tavern that she and Dellen and June built all those years ago, is looking at her. But not with the open fear and distrust and disgust that she comes to expect from him and his people. No, he's looking at her with compassion. His eyes are filled with pity. Something roils deep within her, but she pushes her fears down and grasps the pommel of her mother's sword she keeps strapped to her hip. She grips it tightly, twisting her hand so the familiar edges bite through her gloves and into her palm. The minute pain steadies her, allows her to focus and breathe. June. Fine June. Forcing herself to look back to the flames, she sees that the pyre holds only one form, one body, already partially consumed by the fire that warmed her from across the square. Even so, Terelise can tell they're too small to be June, too small to be her boy. A touch on her elbow makes her jump, but she settles just as quickly when she realizes it's Dellen. How long was she staring into that flame that he was able to cross the square without her noticing? He points at the direction of their tavern with his lips and turns to walk away. Any other day, she'd tease him about how he picked that habit up from her people. Any other day but today. Everything in his sunken gait and curved-in posture screams at her to run, to ignore the feeling of dread scraping its ice-tipped claws against her skull, down her spine. June. There's only one reason he wouldn't be here, especially if Quinn is on that pyre. If she left now, she wouldn't have to hear it said out loud. She should just go. She should, but she follows. Quinn died first. Terelise's eyes snap to Dellen. He won't look at her. She stands in the darkness of the empty tavern, its windows covered in mourning cloth, like the other Ukrainian homes and buildings down in the village. Dellen slowly moves from one lamp to the next. His hands, wrinkled with age, but still strong and thick from decades of archery and manual labor, shakes as he lights each wick. Remember that family you cut wood for when the husband was sick? Their son, the curly-haired boy? He was almost pulled into the forest by a Trikaski, a big one by the sounds of it. Dellen replaces the cover on the last lamp, ripped up the boy's leg something bad. Those village boys say they went after it with June and Quinn. His beard is scruffy, and his gold and silver hair falls over his hollow eyes. Even without the burning pyre and June missing, Dellen's unkempt state would be enough to put her on edge. Is June dead? Her tongue feels as if it's coated with sticky riverbed clay. She isn't sure if the sound she forces out are actually even words. Probably not, because Dellen just keeps going. They said they followed the trail deep into the forest, past your border markers. The boys, they said June was insistent that he was going to go after the Trikaski, no matter what. They didn't know it doubled back on them. Is June dead? She's sure she's clearer this time, but Dellen keeps talking. Quinn was in the back of the group. The Trikaski hit him first. The boys, they said they panicked, scattered. When it pulled Quinn into the underbrush, June followed. And when the village boys said they finally got their nerve, they said they found Quinn's body a few minutes later, Other than a wound to his neck, Dylan looks at the floor, intact. The word rings with sickening clarity through Terralise's head, intact. She slams her fist into a nearby table. The lit lamp at its center clatters with dangerous intent. Is June dead? Dylan doesn't even flinch as he walks over to her. He carefully lifts the oil lamp from the table and moves it to a hook on the wall. De Saint-Jean, a shuddering sigh escapes him. They returned with his bow. He still won't look at her. I had to restring it. They didn't bring him back. Terralise's lip curls, the air cool, and as she draws in a breath through her clenched teeth, they just left him out there. They said there wasn't enough to bring back. Silence fills the tavern. Dylan finally looks her way. Beside him, the tiny fire in the lamp dips and sputters. He's allowed it too much wick. She looks away as tears burn her eyes. No, her boy couldn't have died like that. No. Terralise draws her fist back, clenches it tight, and slams it down on the tabletop as the skin on her knuckles burst apart. She's screaming as she pulls her fist back and smashes it down again and again. The color of a warning sunrise paints the wooden table, splattering and smearing more and more with each strike until her voice breaks with a cracking sob. Her boy, gone. She falls to her knees when the table finally gives out and collapses under her assault. Then Dylan is there, thick arms wrapping around her, pulling her into his solid chest. He's clutching her with a fierceness she forgot he had. His entire body shudders as he buries his face into the crook of her neck. She can feel his tears seep into her collar. He is weeping. She will not. She looks down at her bloody, torn hand as Dylan takes whatever solace he can from an embrace she can't find the strength to return. And that's where I'll stop.
Oh, there we go. That's good. Awesome. Well done, Tonia. So just with her even reading that first section of the story gives you the sense of the intensity and the tension that just flows through this whole story. And that just forces you just to continue reading, to hear more and to learn more about Terralise. And as you talk about her rage, her anger, the frustration that comes with the death of her stepson. And how she's going to deal with that. But it's the detail that caught me as I read through the story, particularly of both the characters and the environment. So whether they're at the tavern or whether they're in Seventhblade and moving around the city, you get a real sense of what it looks like. And I had said earlier to Tonia, I wish I had a map. So that would help me as you navigate the various places where the story takes place. But there is one in the book.
Yeah.
So you guys are lucky that you'll have that map, which is great. So here's my first question. In your bio, you mentioned that you worked as a lore keeper and a world builder at Thought Penny's Entertainment. So what inspired the world building in Seventhblade?
That's a good question. I've always really loved figuring out how societies came to be and where their traditions come from and the way that they're actually built and their hierarchies and everything like that. And basically I started kind of reverse engineering that for a lot of the world building that I do in video games and also for yes, that's good. That's much better. And yeah, for Seventhblade. So I created there's some very detailed traditions and superstitions of different groups and different cultures in Seventhblade. So I basically would find something that seemed really cool, and then I worked backwards as to figure out how to actually build that into their society. And then again, I used a lot of colonial history in Canada and North America, and also different countries throughout the world, and based a lot of the history of Casbah and the country for Seventhblade on that.
So cool. So you talk about traditions and stuff. And so for us as Métis people, as I'm reading through this story, all the subtleties that you included in the story, from the Michif language to expressions that are used, my boy, my girl, you just mentioned lip pointing, that sort of thing. But again, there's also those colonial references that resonate with the resiliency of Métis people. And so I'm wondering what motivated you to include those kind of perspectives in your story?
I've been reconnecting as a Métis person to my culture since forever. Basically, my family wasn't connected almost at all. They would be behind closed doors. They talked about it and they were proud of it, but they hid it from everybody else, it felt like. So I wasn't connected at all. And then we basically, I just basically, as I researched Métis culture and met more Métis people and got more into the actual heritage of it all, I started adding it into the book. So it's all of that was basically added in the last 2 years or 3 years. But with Terry, she's always been a half soul or half white, half non.
Don't say it.
Yeah, exactly. and that's just it. Half soul is a derogatory term in this book, and I did that on purpose to, and she would call herself that once in a while too, right? And so, it's the same thing with Métis people and with a lot of minorities. They'd kind of use that to take it back, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. My mom always called herself a half-breed. She didn't ever use that term Métis, and she said, so long as she used that word, then she's the one who had the power, not somebody else. And so I see the same thing with Terralise. So coming to Terralise, Terralise is a very strong character, and she's very much driven by her emotions. She makes decisions leading with her heart and not necessarily her head, and often lives to regret that. So did you have someone or more than one person in mind as you developed her character?
I think a lot of people I know kind of work like that. I actually developed her alongside Elraiche, and Elraiche is the exact opposite. So I was trying to create a foil between the two of them. And Terralise just seemed like always a much more reckless person. And then when she lost her son, that all kind of got turned up to 11. She just stopped caring and started, she's always been a person that if she wanted to get an answer out of somebody, she'd rather headbutt them than manipulate them like Elraiche would. So, but yeah, and also with, I kind of coded her as having ADHD because I also have it, and it really helped me understand why she'd be so reckless in some ways, and why she has this really strong black and white kind of view of justice and things like that, because that's what I have. So
that's funny, because I never thought about that until now you say it. And now I think about her in terms of her spontaneity, impulsiveness, and that black and white. Yeah. So awesome. So you talk about, the distinct differences between Terralise and Elraiche. And I found that very interesting. But so I'll read what I wrote here. I said, as with all novels, backstories are revealed as the story progresses, but one character's story is still vague to me, and that's Elraiche and his banishment. Without giving away too much of the story, can you give us a little more insight into his banishment? Like, what is it that he did that he wound up there and wants to get back so badly?
I can say a bit of it because it's actually saved for the story later on. But Elraiche, he was banished from his home country because he stood against the colonization by the Parisians of his country, because the people that were in power welcomed it because they were getting more power, and he manipulated things to make it look like he was cool with it, and then it all kind of fell apart. So he was banished. His followers were all cut down and hunted down, and he was basically scrubbed from their history and all of their any references to him. There's a certain there's a pillar that they have of their pantheon that every household has. And so every household, you wouldn't get rid of the whole pillar, but they actually had to like chisel off his level of it. So it's just an empty space where he was. So but yeah, he's the next book, I guess. It's going to be more focused on him and him trying to get back home.
So there is going to be a sequel.
Yeah, definitely.
That was my next question.
Yeah, yeah. There's it was left open ended. I tried to close off this first part of the story as much as possible, but it is left pretty open ended in the next book. So
Awesome. All right. Well, that's all the questions that I have for her. I'm wondering if anybody in the audience has any questions, and if you do, I will bring the mic to you, and you can ask Tonia.
I don't need the mic though.
Good.
Yeah. So, Tonia, just unless you want me to use the mic, but
I think the
for the
online, yeah.
Yeah, just so the people online.
So as a fantasy writer, you've got this extra task of world building, right? And getting that in front of the reader. But like we all know that this starts off as it's a rip-roaring story. You don't need it doesn't matter how much you don't do a data dump on the reader in chapter 1. And I know because I've been part of the process that you've gone through different versions of the story. Did you find that you had to really ration yourself, like as far as how much world building you did each chapter? And did you have to like move some of the world building to later? I've done too much for this chapter. I'll save what an Acrelian priest is for a different chapter or whatever.
Actually, I added world building in the later versions. I always have been taught in video games and a lot of other people who've taught me writing is to start small and always make it more personal and then build out. And I know a lot of fantasy books, some people front load information into the books. There's a prologue or the first chapter is all about, in a world where dragons exist and magic is running wild. I gotta stop flipping my arms around. And the whole setup is right there. But those kind of feel like I can't get into those books. So I always have had that trouble myself, and I think it's partially because of my ADHD, is that I need give me action first and then add everything in later. So I actually had to go back in and add more world building. I had it in my head, but it wasn't actually in the book yet. So I'm like, okay, this is a good place to explain this and that without trying to slow it down too much as well, because too much info is always going to slow down your story.
No, that's good. Yeah. Thank you.
Anybody else have a question?
Congratulations, Tonia. My question is, it sounds like there are a lot of characters in this book. How do you keep track of those characters, and how do you have that continuity from chapter to chapter to chapter with those characters? Because it sounds fairly complicated. Do you have like little sticky notes all over your house, and you every time you add an attribute or a character or an event to that person, do you then add it to their, sticky note? Like, how do you do this?
Yeah, my husband and my son will both attest that I have journals all over the house. And a lot of them have like 1 or 2 pages and then nothing after that, because I'll start a new one, or I just grab whatever's close by and write things down. But a lot of it is I usually kind of figure out the rough plot first. And then when I start getting stuck, and the characters are roughly figured out, I'll take my main characters and I'll actually write out things from their point of view and their motivation. So and I'll keep on coming back to them whenever I get stuck. And then it'll help me figure out the next like few chapters. And then I can weave it in together. So they all have their own running files, basically. Like I probably for each character, especially Elraiche and Elraiche, they probably have 80 or 90 pages of just me trying to figure out what their motivation is. And a lot of times none of that gets into the book, but at least I understand them a lot better. So, but yeah, and then there are sticky notes and like little things running all over the place all the time. My pockets are usually full of them. So,
Anybody else? So I have a question.
yeah, sure. Oh, don't go ahead and we can go back. Yeah,
I'll sit down.
sorry.
In the bio again, when it was talking about world building, and it said a lore keeper, and I don't know what that is.
Sure. That is a title that I was given. Basically, when I was working for Thought Pennies, we worked on a really large intellectual property, and it's still NDA, so I can't really talk about what it was, but it had like at least 50 or 60 books and explanations of what different characters are and what different factions are and all that stuff. So basically I was the one who figured out all the lore that we needed for the story that we were telling, along with, and there was animations and games built on this and everything. So I would get all of the audio information together for the audio guys, like what these monsters sounded like, or gameplay would have, I'd get all of the fighting styles together for a faction and give it to gameplay, and animation, same thing. So not only, I wasn't just doing narrative, I was doing kind of everything across the board. With Lore Keeper, it was a lot of work, but it was very, very fun. And so when Thought Pennies unfortunately had to, they lost their funding for the game, I had all of this information in my head that I had to kind of force out, and it was very hard to do that. But I can still probably bring some of it up, but.
And so did that experience come into play with Seventhblade?
Definitely, yeah. So I was still a world builder along with the lore keeper, so I got to weave their lore into the societies I was building for the game as well. And then it's because that game was based on a lot of more high fantasy, I was able to use some ideas or some information from it to build out my world as well. But that's something I had to be really careful with, because sometimes when I was working with BioWare, their story would start coinciding with my story sometimes, so I'd have to cut things out of my book to make sure that I didn't accidentally steal something from a different IP I was working on separately. So
Somebody up there had a question?
Yes.
that's my mom.
Yeah. Hello, Tonia.
Hi.
So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about Elraiche's hair color.
Yes, sure. So Elraiche, she actually has red hair with black tips, and because she is half soul, so she is half human, half spirit in her people's words, or half god in the Krellian word. Anybody who's born as a half, they take on their hair color of their parent that is a god, but the edges are always the tips are always the human side color. So she has red hair from her father's side, and then her mother's side is black. So if she cuts her hair, it'll always make a fringe of black eventually, kind of oxidizes or something. Don't know the typewriter, sure.
Do you remember me talking about
Yeah.
you as a baby? Okay, as you, Tonia was born with black fluffy hair. And as it grew in blonde. And then it was the black fringe at the bottom. It never did fall out. I eventually had to cut it off.
That's where I took it from.
Okay, any other questions?
With half soul being the equivalent of a slur, is there an actual name for people who are? Because then,
It's a good question. No.
oh,
There isn't. There should be. I'll probably make one up now, or use Michif to make one. Probably Michif, and then every different culture would have a different name. But yeah, everybody uses half soul, and that's the bad thing about it, because no humans think they're safe, or they're all persecuted. So. Yes.
Question. All right. Oh, there we go.
Hi, Tonia.
Yeah.
Congratulations. So you mentioned that this book went through like many iterations from like game to comic and back and forth, and now it's a novel. Is this the first project that you have written like in completion as a novel, or do you have others on the backlog that you had started and then stopped, or finished but never published?
I've done an interactive novel that I finished, but it's as a book itself, this is the first one I finished. But yeah, I have about 8 or 9 different stories in the backlog that I'm working on, and I'll pick up and then put away and things like that. And I think that really, same with like Seventhblade. I think it really helped being able to put it away and pick it up again, because it's matured as I went. So.
That's so cool. Thank you.
So in those ideas of a graphic novel and a game, do you have that as an idea for the story to have a version of it in game form or graphic novel?
I would absolutely love to have it turned into a game. But I also don't want this particular story to be turned in, because I want to be able to control the narrative about like an Indigenous people, and I don't want the games that I write, they're all RPGs, so you have branching dialogue and branching story, and I don't want you to be able to change this story too much. But set in the world, that would be very cool. Like, you'd still follow, you could follow a different character and make those decisions, but I still want to establish this before I'd allow anybody to change the narrative, I guess is it. But yeah, I would then, hey, it'd be very cool to be an animated series. That would be lovely.
Lots of good questions. So anybody else? Okay, I'll come back up there. All right, well, it's 7:45, and so we can wrap up this portion of the book launch. And then Tonia's gonna go over there and she's gonna sign books. And so that's your opportunity to come up, get an autographed book, but also an opportunity just to have a little chat if you want. Okay, so just on behalf of McNally, thank you, McNally, and Tonia for being here.
Thanks so much.
Very much appreciated. The rest of you guys have a great evening.
Thanks so much for coming.